And coming to that story now about Denel. Now, yesterday we heard the announcement that the company will not be able to pay 100% of workers' salaries. And Liberated Metalworkers Union of South Africa, or Limusa, they have indicated that they want actually the dismissal of Toit, who is the Group Chief Executive Officer of Denel, to be effected, and saying that Denel's challenges are self-inflicted. And joining us now from our Durban studio is Mawonga Madolo, who is Deputy General Secretary of Limusa. Thanks so much for coming through this morning and speaking to us about this matter.
Thank you. Good morning, Sakina, and good morning to the listeners.
Let's just start here, Mr. Madolo. First and foremost, some people didn't go to work yesterday, as we understand it. Can you just give us a sense of what exactly transpired and how many people actually did not show up for work as a result of the payment situation at Denel?
We cannot confirm the numbers of exactly who did not come to work, but this had impacted on, obviously, work attendance yesterday. But largely, most of the workers were at work. But the issue for us was that this announcement came at the evening before the actual date of payment. So this is what we described as very unprofessional and very clumsy on part of the Denel management.
So when you say this was clumsy and unexpected, was it really, given what had happened in September, where we know that the management at Denel only received 80% of their salaries? At that point, did the alarm bells not go off for you as union leaders?
No, not exactly. Our description of the situation is that it is self-inflicted on part of the board and the executive. The basis of our view are that during this period of 5 months, Mr. Toit, the group CEO, has effectively received over 1.5 of bonuses. He's effectively received over 600,000 of relocation fees. So in our view, that there's been lack of priority on part of Denel. There's been this, what we characterize as wasteful expenditure on part of the board. And this is why that we are making a call that the group CEO, Mr. Toit, have failed to effect a turnaround strategy that he was given to effect in the past 5 months, which has effectively led to workers now having to have not income for the month.
So you calling for Mr. Toit to be dismissed as the Group Chief Executive Officer, but some would argue that Mr. Toit did not allow or approve the payments to himself. So why are you only calling for his dismissal as opposed to anyone else or others to go along with him?
In fact, we're saying the reason for Mr. Toit to resign is that he had a strategy, a turnaround strategy, which he was responsible to effect. And he failed to do so. The result that workers who have not received their income as per the contractual obligation on the 25th of the month. That is a result of a failed exercise. So effectively the board must take a decision about his continued service, but we're saying he must take responsibility, because what we're saying, part of leadership is that you must say when you have failed your task, you must then tender your resignation. So we're now calling on him to effect the resignation, but a failure to do so will have to engage the board and take the matter further, yeah.
So does this mean that you still have confidence in the board of Denel?
We have our concerns with the board, but we have not come to a conclusion on whether there should be a removal of the board. But we have concerns in how the board has allowed this to continue on its watch.
So with regard to workers, of course, and the situation that they find themselves in, it was announced yesterday by Minister Pravin Gordhan that the money has now been found and people will be paid. How has this been communicated to the workers at Denel?
This was communicated last night via a communication by the CEO confirming that there has been some funding which has come into play, making a further commitment that the rest of the 15% will be paid by Friday. In our view, we welcome the relief and that has been announced by the minister. However, there are things that are still outstanding, like for instance the responsibility that the employer must take in the light of the cost implication. Cost implication would be as a result of the debit orders that would have gone through, and those debit orders of workers would not have been pulled through because of the income that was not there. So there are financial implications which Denel must take responsibility of. Further to that, we want a confirmation that going forward, this is not going to be a situation where workers towards the month end, they will be worried whether or not are they going to be receiving their salary. So we want stability and confirmation that going forward, this is not going to be an issue that continues to confront workers during their month end.
So what will be your next course of action as worker representatives in this regard? How are you going to ensure that this type of situation does not repeat itself, where workers find out on the eve of getting paid that their salaries won't be paid in full, or perhaps even not paid at all?
Our course of action is we have requested an urgent meeting with management. Our course of action is that we want certainty. We want also management to listen to workers on how to resolve the challenges within the institution. Those proposals by workers should be taken into consideration in the light of our view that there's also been what is characterized in our view as wasteful expenditure. So we're saying that we must sit down with management. They must listen to workers' views on how to resolve the problem. We must also get transparency on the funder. Who is the funder and what does it mean for the institution? Is it going to bring about stability? So this is our course of action going forward. But we also want to warn the company that the issues of not meeting contractual obligations of paying workers on time is a legal requirement, and a failure to do that requirement, we've also got a legal recourse which we can effect if this matter continues to confront workers in Denel.
Mr. Madolo, if you would please elaborate on some of these ideas you say that workers have with regards to cost saving and perhaps the restructuring of Denel.
The cost saving will start from the board. For instance, we've made a reference to the transfer or the cost that relates to the group CEO, that he had received bonuses. He also received relatively about 106,000. So we're saying those issues, we must cut costs on those issues. And also, there are institutions that are providing service to Denel, which the renegotiations of those institutions that are costing Denel quite substantively. They must negotiations of those contracts. They must cut costs of doing business with the institutions. So those are the ideas that we'd have, which would want to place to management to effect.
So let me understand this, Mr. Madolo. Do you only want to place that ideas in front of management's door now that things have gone south at Denel, or have you been in conversation with management about these issues prior to this incident?
We have raised some of these issues, and we must say that there has not been quite effective communication between the new group CEO and the unions. I think he had made a confirmation yesterday that unions are not informed about what the board is doing. I think we must confirm that there's a distance in terms of how the trade unions and the board and the CEO effectively have a structure to raise these issues. So we have a gap which we'd want to close going forward, that the CEO must come down. We must be able to get to engage on our views.
Don't you think that you then let your members down as Limusa by perhaps not being as proactive as you could have been with regard to spotting the dangers at Denel? I spoke earlier about the fact that senior management only received 80% of their salaries in September. Did you not see that as a sign that there was imminent problems that could arise at Denel with other members of staff? And also, two, did you not see that as a commitment by management that they were the first to actually take the blow when it came to the organization being unable to pay full salaries?
I think we would want to start by saying that we have not failed members, and we are on record having raised issues of problems in Denel. We had written submissions through our shop stewards to management. So we have been raising issues, and we have not failed members, and we do not want to take responsibility of this action. I think management has a responsibility to effect strategies to turn around the company. And in our view is that they had seen this for quite some time. And what we want also to highlight to you, which you might not be aware of, that there's been challenges in Denel which relating to even bonuses at some point, our workers having not received bonuses. And we had raised that this was going to be a crisis if not addressed at that point. So we have been consistent in raising the issues, and it is therefore incorrect for any conclusion that the unions have failed workers. Here we are sitting with the board or management which do not take considerations those views, and it could not be then concluded that unions have failed.
So given the bleak economic outlook at Denel as we speak, do your members still expect to be paid bonuses?
Workers' bonuses are based on performance, and there are tools to measure performance. There's always going to be, if those performance are met and targets of workers have been met, workers, their bonuses are due. So bonuses are a scientific measure. So it's not on basis of that there's an economic crisis, but there are basis of an individual having to meet their targets. So if workers have met their targets, the bonuses should be paid.
And that's a very interesting assertion, and I'm not saying it's correct or incorrect. It's very interesting because you actually were just lamenting the fact that the CEO was paid a bonus, or whatever bonuses were due to him as per his contractual inclinations with the organization. So you feel it's okay for workers to demand those bonuses, but when it comes to management, perhaps the organization doesn't have to be bound by that. Is that what you say?
Maybe let's explain what is not clear to us, what is not clear which should be assisted. What is not clear for us is that you have a CEO that has relatively 5 months, and in our view there's not been a success reported on his work, and then he received a bonus which is over 1.5 million. And that is different to a situation where workers get their annual bonus, and upon receiving that annual bonus there will be a measure that says you have achieved this and this, and therefore your bonus will be this much. So our view is that this bonus of 1.5 for the group CEO has no scientific measure to say on what basis is it based on.
But is it something that's contained in his contract? Because as the union, I would expect you to know this, what is contained, perhaps not wholly, but as far as these bonuses are concerned, do you know whether that is something that's contained in the CEO's contract?
Unfortunately, we're not privy with the CEO's contract, and maybe upon his engagement with the union, those issues should be transparent to say these are the bonuses as per the contract. We must be able to be in a position to say on what criteria those bonuses effected. Are they due to him? What has he been able to provide to the institution for him to be able to get those bonuses?
And then one of the other issues, and not peculiar to Denel, but at many of these state-owned enterprises, has been the notion that they are bloated. And we are assuming that there would be retrenchments across the board at state-owned entities. What is your response to that? And do you believe that this could happen at Denel as well?
The issues of retrenchment, we as a union are opposed to any attempt to retrench workers. I think there's been a commitment which the labor and business had committed to, which was led by the president, and that summit was a commitment that there was going to be no retrenchment. And our view is that if these institutions they are able to engage thoroughly with unions, there could be a form of prioritization on how these institutions are spending their resources, and to ensure that when the belt are being tied and everyone has to ensure that we are on the tight situation, that everyone does their task, and it is not expected that workers are paying for the lavish lifestyle of the board executive. So our issue is that if there's to be a way of resolving a problem, it's not necessarily a retrenchment, but how then do you restructure to ensure that everyone is able to ensure that the institutions are able to float? Because we don't have luxury in the light of unemployment in South Africa. We don't have luxury of retrenching workers. However, let's sit around the table and find modalities to ensure that everyone, including the executives, that ensure that we are able to pull these institutions out of the situation.
So just finally, Mr. Madolo, the way forward. So what are you going to do next with regard to the situation at Denel as we speak?
Yeah, obviously in Denel we want stability. Denel is a big institution which relatively has over 3,500 workers. So uncertainty in that institutions impacts on a lot more families than just those workers. So we want certainty in that, and then we want a thorough discussion with the board. We want a stability going forward. We don't want the next month that would come to Morning Live to talk about the uncertainty of workers. So that discussion must further talk to the restructuring of the institution to ensure that there is not going to be any retrenchment. That must talk to how does Denel gets business, its market expansion abroad. So it talks to a number of issues which we are committed as a union to sit down with management, explore possibilities of ensure that the institution is sustained as a state-owned institution. We also want to make a position very clear as a union that we are opposed to any intention to privatize the institutions, that the institution must remain a state-owned institution.
Oh, thank you so much to Mawonga Madolo, who's Deputy General Secretary of Limusa, for discussing state-owned arms manufacturer Denel with us. And as you heard there, very disconcerted about the 600,000 Rand relocation fee that was paid to the CEO, Daniel du Toit, and also bonuses of 1.5 million, the union alleges was paid to the CEO, which begs the questions that need to be asked perhaps to the board of Denel. If the company cannot pay its workers their full salaries, then how did it arrive at a conclusion that it was in a position to pay these bonuses to the CEO? But many questions still remain. At this point, though, it has been announced that there has been financial relief for Denel, and they will be able to pay the balance of the salaries which they didn't pay yesterday by Friday. So let's leave that one there, and it's time now for the latest news.